This is Blackstone Joe, and you're listening to Slick Talk.
If I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
There's the stink of oil about him.
Hello and welcome to episode 141 of Slick Talk. I am your host, Blackstone Joe, and I'm glad you're here. Today is a special episode as I had a chance to sit down with fellow report writer Augustia. She's one of the best writers around, in your host's humble opinion, and as such, I was excited to sit down and dig into how she goes about writing a report, what informs her writing style, and just what she's into. It's a good hang, if I do say so myself. So here's Augustia and I in studio. Okay, Augustia, report writer extraordinaire, and so much more.
Extraordinaire.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Take me back to your interview. What was it like?
I was really excited about the lab tour.
Mm-hmm. Did you know anything about the laboratory setting in any capacity before you interviewed?
Like this one? Or
Labs in general. Beyond like a chemistry class in high school, I didn't know anything about elements, tests of whatever kind. So like walking around the lab was a weird experience at first.
Yeah. My experience with labs isn't much more than that, Science classes in school. I took a chemistry class in undergrad. But I always really enjoyed those classes. I don't know, I didn't have extensive knowledge, but I was familiar enough with a lab.
I felt like if I could get to the point where I was writing about it, I felt really good about my chances because I knew I could write.
Yeah.
But doing the process of running a test in high school or an experiment, participating in that aspect of it was terrifying to me. But if I could get to the point where I had to just communicate the results, or even if I did a bad job at the experiment, get me to the writing part because I knew I could shine there. Mm-hmm. So even it was a real, I'm faking it and then I'm going to make it, but not in the scientific way until I started at Blackstone and I was able to do both.
I ended up being a lot of times the person in group projects, specifically in chemistry labs, where I would do the entire experiment and the rest of my group would just sit there because they didn't care about it and they didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
So I think we're a little opposite on that.
Well, basically, I'm finding out that you're like the ideal candidate in many respects. If you were eager to get acclimated to the scientific side as well as write about it, that's a rare combination, I feel like.
Yeah.
So when it came to writing in general, because we're both report writers, but when did you know that you had something special on that side of it? When did you know I can shine in this way?
Just writing in general, throughout life. I have always really enjoyed writing. Honestly, my first success story, when I was in first grade, my school did this thing where they gave everybody blank books. It was a hardcover, I don't know, maybe 20-page just book, and you were supposed to write your own story and illustrate it a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was probably not a great story because I was in first grade. But I got picked as one of maybe 30 kids in the whole state in first grade. Again,
still good though. I mean, that's when you have unbridled enthusiasm, I feel.
But yeah. So I got to go to, I want to say it was Western Michigan University. Not certain on that though. I got to go to a little one-day conference for student writers at a university, and that just felt so special. And I think that was a really important or really effective confidence boost for me as a, I don't know, 8-year-old or whatever. But I think it really gave me the confidence to keep writing, even if I knew it was bad, just to try it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a good experience when I was really young with writing, and I think that helped me to keep invested in it throughout life.
As it been a comfort level, whether it is fiction or nonfiction, instructional? I mean, I feel like you need to be able to do a little bit of everything to really call yourself a writer. But is there a comfort like field where it's like, okay, if I'm playing in fact-based writing, of course now after being at Blackstone for a while, I feel like that's an obvious
Right,
yes. So
it's
you're
kind of a
comfortable
given.
with it. But has that always been the case, or did you feel sort of restrained by having to stick to the facts so much, or do you? I view it as more of a challenge to like show off your creative side and report the facts.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, is like it is a challenge, and it's fun to be able to pull off. I don't really find that I have like a harder time with one over the other. And obviously, it helps to motivate yourself to write when that's your job. Passion project type stuff that I work on my own time has been a little bit harder to really, really dig into.
It's really important, though, I think. Like, if I don't apply my creative pursuits like outside of the office, I think what I do in the office can suffer. Like, I have to constantly be feeding that in and out of the office. And do you feel that at all, where if you're not reading as much, or if you're not like trying to write outside of the office, that maybe your work in the office, do you feel like it's any different?
Yeah, a little. And I mean, I don't struggle to read. I'm reading all the time. Like, I will pull out a book on my lunch break while I'm clocked out for half an hour, and I will read while I'm shoveling food in my mouth.
Yeah.
So that has never been anything that I've like struggled to motivate with. But I do think that the two, like writing creatively and reading, and then writing professionally, I think those all like interplay in an interesting way. They inform each other. Even like in undergrad, in some of my writing classes, one of my professors would say that reading counts as time spent writing, because you're studying the craft, you're seeing what works for other people, and being able to consider how you might apply that in your own work.
Yeah, I think part of our job, which is proofing each other, is huge, not just for the obvious catching of errors, but understanding how else we can approach what it is we have to report. Because it's such a wide range. We also keep in mind, by doing all the proofing, that there's a wide range of going about it.
Absolutely. I got a note not too long ago from Brian telling me that, with the other ones that were like, oh, I changed this, next time consider, there was one that he gave me the lab number and just said, this reads like one of my reports. I love it. And
wow, I'm jealous of that.
That was huge praise. Yeah, I was stoked. I was like, okay, you could have given me 50 negative notes for that one positive.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't. And I actually, realistically, 50 bad notes is, I don't even write 50 reports most days. So that would be a feat.
That's incredible. I feel like Ryan's reports, for those that don't know him, the president of Blackstone, I feel like his reports are so good just because his whole approach is like uniquely, it feels familiar in a very like Americana sort of way, but it's still unique to him. So it's approachable, but you at the same time know that he's still very individualistic in a lot of ways, but it's never hard to access what he's saying. And it has character at every step of the way. Like my favorite Ryan line of all time in a report was in reference to an engine that just never looked good. He said that maybe this one was made on a Friday. And just that right there is a staple, I think, of how I think about like his writing style. So do you find yourself taking certain turns of phrase, or how do you find that other writers influence you?
Yeah, I think turns of phrase, every once in a while I'll see one. I had actually for a while on my computer, I had like digital sticky notes of a couple ways to phrase something that I found myself just falling into the exact same phrasing every single time.
That's good.
And I was like, I know I need to switch this up, but if I try to just sit here and think of ways to do that on my own, I'm going to look at a report for 20 minutes before I come up with a good way to say it. So I think I actually had grabbed one from you and one from Eric.
Yeah.
Just phrasing for how to refer to universal averages, I think, and stuck those on my desktop, and that was really helpful. So it's nice to be able to look at how other people are writing what is essentially the same information to give it variation and make it so that it's not boring for repeat customers to read.
Yeah, kind of ties into what I want to jump into next, which is what advice would you give a new analyst? In addition to, I think that right there would be a key point for me, just learning how to absorb other styles and integrate them into your own. But like dealing with the mountain of information that we have to communicate on a daily basis, what would you want to tell like day one Augustia if you could?
I think one big thing that I specifically struggled with starting here was feeling okay asking questions. I feel like a lot of the professional world views having to ask a question as being underqualified.
Yeah.
But really, this is an industry and a type of work that just is not prevalent. So there's no need to feel like you have to know everything day one. And, like that is something that I think is important to keep in mind, that actually knowing when to ask questions, like knowing what you don't know, is a really good starting point.
Yeah. And I always like to remind myself that there is not a finite amount of information to learn here. So like there is a baseline of facts that are never going to change. Like we have the same elements in the spectral exam that we're going to report. We understand familiar sources, but there's never going to be a stopping point where different designs come out or different recipes for an oil and its added package. There's always going to be change, and therefore we should always be interested in like at least asking a question and making sure that we're looking at it the right way,
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've done some DIY car work of your own. Do you think you would have done that without having been at Blackstone? Or has being at Blackstone kind of informed you to tackle more of your own?
Like a lot of people here at Blackstone do some of their own car work. So knowing that I have other people, like have access to other people that I can be like, hey, I'm working on this thing on my car. Have you done this before? Can you help me? Or like even just, can you give me information about this? I think that definitely has increased my confidence in doing my own car work, but I think I would have eventually delved into that either way, but it's nice to have the extra resources here.
Yeah. And there's like some commonality and overlap. Like I think you and Reagan have both done your own brake repairs, I believe.
Very cool. I did not know that Reagan had done that. That's cool.
Yeah. Reagan is multi-talented in a lot of ways, but I think she did that before she even started at Blackstone, which is just kind of interesting. You never know like what's going to make someone stick. I feel like you can walk in the door a really good writer or someone who's really inclined mechanically, but regardless, you're going to have a lot to learn. How do you handle explaining results to people who have spent probably their whole life being on the mechanic side and they're new to report writing? How do you approach that when you have to bridge that gap?
I honestly find that those are the customers that are the most excited to see what we do. So I don't feel like there is actually, in my experience at least, I don't feel like there's that big a gap to bridge because they're open.
Yeah.
I don't have to fight to get someone who is familiar with the world of automotives to be receptive to what I'm saying. They're just excited to learn more.
I think we definitely saw that in practice when we did our recent visit to Stone Street Quarries, talking to the guys about the repairs they have to do. I think you could tell there was a real appreciation of what we can see from our vantage point versus what they're able to tell. And that was a really cool visit. Have you had any use of oil analysis outside the office? Like, how has it helped you personally with what you own and maintain?
I think it's nice to have the confidence of knowing what isn't a problem. With my husband's car overheating one day while he was on the way to work, grabbing a sample and being able to bring it in, have it tested, and know that he wasn't losing coolant into the engine
that's
was
huge.
massively helpful, even just in deciding whether or not we were going to take it to a mechanic.
Has it made you more confident in what you own as well? Like, what was the buying process as far as like what made you consider to go after the Camry?
So actually, with my Camry, I did not seek out that car. I messaged my sisters when I was ready to get rid of my Vibe, and I was like, oh my gosh, shopping for cars is a nightmare. I don't want to do this. Nothing I can afford is going to be a good car. I was just like freaking out. I was not excited. And my oldest sister was like, oh, fun fact, we are actually looking at getting rid of my Camry. Do you want it?
Oh, nice.
So, yeah. So I've never actually spent time researching vehicles to decide what to buy. But I think now, if I were looking for a new vehicle or, when I eventually need another car, I think I'll be able to be a lot more choosy, a lot more decisive. Like I'll have a better understanding of what a good engine is and also what I need my engine to do.
Yeah. Because I think it's really cool that you happen to just pick up one of the most reliable in terms of how consistent they look, and they don't have a lot of common problems that we have to watch out for. Because before I started here, I just heard all the time, oh, Hondas last forever, Toyotas last forever. But I didn't know why. I didn't know that was because the engines don't make a lot of metal, and there's not a lot of common issues, recalls, etc. That go into them. So that's really cool that you happen to pick what you did.
Yeah. And it's actually also super interesting that the Pontiac Vibe, at least the 2005, I'm not confident in every model year, but the 2005 actually had a Toyota engine in it. And, maybe this is just like confirmation bias, but I've had 2 really good Toyota engines in my life. So more than likely, I'm going to end up sticking with that brand just because it's worked out well for me in the past. And I think we see that a lot too with like brand loyalty when it comes to oil.
Yeah.
A lot of people that prefer one oil over another, it's not, oh, that one, I tried it and it ruined an engine. It's, well, I've used this one for the past 20 years in every vehicle I own, so why would I switch it up? And I think that's as good a reason as any.
I had a friend who listens to the show, and they said that the last time they took their car for an oil change and they tried to get them to pay for full synthetic just because, and she proudly stated that she didn't need it and that conventional was fine, and she goes, thank you, you saved me like $30 or something like that. Does it put you at so much more at ease knowing that it's not about the brand or the flashy advertisement?
Absolutely. Yeah, I did an oil change on my Camry not too long ago. Actually, it's been a while. But I went to the parts store just to pick up some oil, and, they've got all of these coupons. Buy this one and whatever.
What'd you go with?
I don't remember, but it was the cheapest one they offered.
Yeah.
And so it's been nice to know that, like, empirically with the data we have, there's no difference. At least as far as with how the engine runs. If not like a peace of mind thing, a peace of wallet thing.
Yeah, I'll take either one.
Right.
Speaking of the data, what is your favorite element in the spectral exam and why?
My favorite in the spectral exam is probably Arryn. I think it's maybe a surprising answer, but I feel like that's one that I have a really good grasp on. And I think you can tell a lot with Arryn. If someone's running a big truck that sits idling for hours at a time, and they give you the option of, they say, this is how many miles and this is how many hours, it's cool to be able to say, oh, we're going to start with hours because that's going to give us a much better picture of what's really going on with your engine.
I think it's also cool to look at it as like the star of the show because so many of the wearing components are steel. So you can consider it the leading element in that sort of way.
Arryn is definitely our leading lady.
Yeah. So it plays such a big role and takes up so much of the engine. So yeah, at first I was surprised. I thought you might go for something maybe sticking with the acting metaphor, an element that can play multiple roles. Well, Arryn can play multiple roles, but I guess some elements can be a sneaky antagonist.
Yeah, I did consider going with potassium, and I think that falls into that category because it can either be like flux in a brand new diesel, or it can be coolant. And, those are two very different situations, and you have to go about them very differently.
You could say that potassium is the Snape of the story, if you will.
Yeah, you could.
I've never even read a Harry Potter book, but I know a couple of things.
Popular culture.
Yeah, we talked about it off mic, but manganese is still the one for me, just because you can use it to deduce certain things. Have you ever had a situation with a customer where they responded to a report you wrote and they're like, I'm very pleasantly surprised that you knew exactly what was going on without me even having to say it? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, I've had that a couple times. I think it's most common with silicon, with telling people to check air filtration. A lot of times, and that's on our end, that's super easy. That is the lowest hanging fruit. But I think, if you're not familiar with oil analysis, it's really cool to get that advice and then find out that was the only thing that was going wrong, and it's an easy fix. It doesn't cost much. So I think, there are a lot of factors that play into that being something that's impressive, I think. But
yeah, couldn't agree more. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So one of my favorite aspects of this job is having the time to sit and talk with other employees from around the stone. We don't often have time to talk shop in the midst of our 9-to-5, let alone just plain get to know each other. This show offers that opportunity, as well as giving our listeners the chance to learn more about oil analysis and how it's done here at 416 East Pettit. So thanks to Augustia for hanging out, and you, the listener, for riding along. This is Blackstone Joe, signing off.
The Slick Talk podcast is powered by Blackstone Laboratories. If you're ready to start your oil analysis journey, visit blackstone-labs.com to order your free test kit.